Okay, this is Charles Kelly. How are you doing? Welcome to Money Tips. I want to tell you today that the London property market is changing. It really is changing. And in fact, so many landlords now are leaving the market. They're selling up that there's a statistic out that 85,000 landlords have now quit the property market or just walked away, sold up, done something different in the last 5 years. Now, I want you to, just before I go on, please like and share this information. If you can, share it with your friends. And also do check out my free training to give you lots more money tips and advice on how you can get your finances in order. I'm not giving specific financial advice, but I'm telling you in general terms how you can get your finances in order and start to build real wealth. Now, look, in the last 5 years, 85 landlords have just left the property market. I think they've just sort of had enough. I was actually one of them. I started reducing my exposure to buy-to-let property when George Osborne, the famous George Osborne, brought in his tax hikes on landlords and brought in other legislation as well, but gave tax breaks to big corporations and companies that wanted to buy property. For instance, the stamp duty, the 3% levy on small people buying properties, but it didn't apply to large companies buying multiple properties. The tax relief changes didn't apply to companies buying within limited companies, whereas most landlords, the vast majority of landlords always bought their properties through just in their own names or with a partner. So we know that these tax breaks have not helped small landlords in any way whatsoever. So a lot of them got fed up at that point, and I was one of them, 2017-18. But it's got worse than that because now we've got more government red tape. We've had to comply with more legislation, more things to do, electrical reports, for instance. I mean, I agree that a property should be safe, but whenever you get one of these electricians, they're always going to find something wrong. They're always going to find some cable that is now no longer compliant, and you always end up spending £400 or £500 in extra work. So it's great news for electricians, but not so for landlords. And this is why I think not only are they these changes gone into force, but now they're worried about new legislation to give tenants more rights, possible sort of lifelong tenancies that maybe landlords don't want. And the big one that's hit the headlines is the ending of no-fault evictions. Now, eviction sounds a very emotive word, but what we're saying is that at the end of a tenancy, you've got to have a reason to get back your property. Eviction just means you want your property back, right? So it's not a question of, at a whim, a landlord's going to start throwing people out. A lot of tenants will not leave at the end of the tenancy. They want a Section 21 notice. They want to be evicted. And therefore they can go to the council and get housed in the council. But now that this could end, the no-fault eviction could end, which means you will not just be able to take back control of your property without a good and valid reason. So that's another reason why landlords are quitting the market and have done in their droves. I mean, it's getting on for 100,000 properties off the market. And this is why, now what happens in the law of supply and demand, what happens when there's less product and more people are chasing that product? Well, of course, the price goes up, as in any market. And demand for rental properties, according to Rightmove, has risen by an average of 14%. But in some parts of London, it's risen by, like in the Romford area, it's risen by over 100%. This is enquiries for rental properties. And in some areas, it's as much as 200% rise in the last year, according to Rightmove. Yet the number of available properties in the last year dropped by 35%. So is it surprising that prices have gone up? And is it surprising when you think of all and this is just in the London area, maybe in your area it's different, but of course we saw that rents dropped during the last few years and people were moving out, but now they seem to be moving back in. And London will always be London. People will want to live in London. There's jobs in London, there's opportunities in London. So people will want to live nearer to their work. But this is what's been happening. And this is as a result, direct result, I think, of government intervention into what was working quite well as a free market. It was working quite well for many, many years. Don't forget, the government have not built enough council houses and not built enough social houses since really the 1980s. So it's no fault of private landlords that there is a shortage of properties. So I've written about this before. I talked about trouble ahead for landlords with the no fault evictions, but now I'm saying things are getting worse. Now, of course, if you're a landlord and you've got property, you can get a bit more rent for it, but a lot of landlords don't want that. They just think it's just becoming too much of a hassle. Don't forget, most landlords are small landlords. They've got 1 or 2 properties. They may have inherited a property. They may become an accidental landlord, but they're not the big corporations that have got lots and lots of properties. And these big companies, they're not going to want to deal with every type of letting situation. They want the lucrative market. They want the co-living spaces. They want the luxury end of the market. They don't want to deal in the nitty-gritty end. You know, the Lloyds banks and the Goldman Sachs are getting into property. They will probably go for the upper end of the market, and they'll mess it up anyway. Big companies have too many costs. They have too many staff on board. They won't run it as efficiently as most private landlords. Now, that leads me on to another thing. The property market in general. I talked about the property market, which was predicted to fall by 8% next year. This is according to one of the lenders, Lloyds Halifax. Look at this: London to be hit hardest by the market. This is in the Evening Standard. Incidentally, the editor of the Evening Standard is one George Osborne. He's no longer in politics. He's now telling us what to do in his newspapers. But it's a bleak warning for homeowners as bank again raises interest rates again. So that's not good news. House prices dive at the fastest rate for 18 months after the mini budget. So things are looking pretty serious for the property market in general. I just want to show you a couple of other things here. Maybe if I can share my screen, if it works this time, because what I'm seeing here is a pattern of things that are going on here, and it's things that are looking to me like we're going to see a big change in the property market in the next year or so, because landlords now are also faced with higher interest rates. Of course, we're now being hit with higher interest rates, and it means that the affordability test for just the affordability test for a buy-to-let mortgage has just gone completely out of the window now. It just doesn't add up. I was talking to a mortgage broker the other day, and he said that the affordability test is just gone. Now you can see here that London needs almost 85,000 new private rented homes a year, the report warns. You can read that full article at the National Registered Landlords Association. So that's quite a serious thing. That's not going to happen, is it? We're not going to see 85,000 new properties, new rented properties in a year. Clearly, they're not building enough. It's just not going to happen. So that's one report there that it is quite clear what's going on. Other report here I picked up in the press is the average London rents now have hit £553 a week, right? So that's 25,000 a year. Now, a lot of people don't even earn that much. And, certainly after tax, a lot of people, you'd have to be on the mid-30s to earn 25,000 after tax. And then you'd be paying 100% of your income in rent on average. Now, of course, this would include properties that people can share, but it's not unusual to find a property, 2 people sharing a property, paying 20-odd thousand a year. And in that report, it says that people are going over their budgets. They just can't afford, and there's people on waiting lists, and 30 people going for one rental property. I remember being in this situation myself many years ago when I started out trying to find a property. So this is not new in London. I remember having to ring up a letting agent every day, and if you didn't ring up by sort of 9:30, everything was gone. That was just for viewings. I remember getting on a bus and going to a viewing, and there was loads of people there already. They beat me to it. Then he said, right, there's another viewing in another place, and I had to jump on a bus there, and by the time I got there, some other people had driven there, and that was gone. And it was total despair, So I've been there. I feel for the people that are in this situation. So look out for that. I think the property market is in for a change in the next year with higher interest rates, with the cost of living crisis. The property market is bound to slow down. I don't think it's going to be an out-and-out crash, but it is definitely on the move downwards, right? And I think there's no doubt about that. Now, the cost of living, millions of people have no savings, as this is at a time when prices are soaring. So, this is because people have no backup. They don't have a backup plan. They don't have any buffer in the bank. And this is despite living in one of the richest countries in the world. It's the sixth or seventh richest country, fifth, sixth, or something like that, richest country in the world, depending on how you measure it, GDP per person or GDP per capita, depending on how you measure it. We are still in the top 10, at least, of the richest countries in the world. And yet, a quarter of adults in the UK have less than £100 in savings. Now, £100 is nothing. They have less than £100 in savings. This is according to a survey by the Money and Pensions Service. They've surveyed thousands of people, and they found out that 17% of those people have nothing set aside, absolutely zero. That's 1 in 6. And then 5% have less than £50, 4% between £50 and £100 in savings. So you can say that a quarter of people in the UK have virtually no savings. And that £50 or £100 in savings could just be swallowed up by an extra bill, or a parking ticket, or something breaking down. It wouldn't even cover the breakdown of a washing machine. So as the cost of living soars, the figures predict that millions of people, if you take those figures and spread it out over the population, millions of people have actually no savings in the richest country, or one of the richest countries in the world. And people in America are in the same sort of position. In Asian countries, they tend to save more, especially in countries like Japan. But here, it seems to have gone out to the window. People are more likely to buy lottery tickets where you're certain to lose than put your money into, say, a pension or a mutual fund where you're almost certain to win. They'd rather sort of take a chance on a lottery where you've got 14 million to 1 chance of winning. You're almost certain to lose. And yet I see in the poorest areas, people relying on turning to gambling, turning to the lottery, buying scratch cards and this sort of thing. People that can least afford it seem to follow these habits. A lot of wealthy people I know don't even buy a lottery ticket. They just think it's not a good bet to go on. It's not a good way of saving for retirement or for anything for that matter. Now, as I said last week, the Bank of England have said in the past that we're already in a recession. I think we are. We may not officially be according to the 2 quarters rule. That's 2 quarters of negative GDP, but we certainly seem to be in a recession. Prices are just becoming unaffordable even for the things like food and basic things and your household goods. So now the Bank of England are warning that we will enter the longest recession since records began in this form. The longest recession, I wouldn't say it's ever, but it's certainly since records began. I've seen quite long recessions in my own lifetime, and I'm sure there have been longer recessions in the 1930s. But since they started measuring in this way, it's going to be the longest recession, certainly for the last 40 years. And this is now, as they've raised interest rates by the highest level ever, by 0.5% since 1989. We know that rates have crept up. We know that mortgage rates are becoming unaffordable. We know that 100,000 people a month and 2 million people are in mortgages which are affected by these rate rises. In other words, they're not in a fixed rate, or they're coming to an end of a fixed rate. So how will people manage when their mortgage goes up from, say, £500 or £600 a month to maybe £1,200 or £1,500 a month? This is on top of gas and electricity bills doubling and trebling, despite the fact that the price of wholesale gas and fuel and that sort of thing, the wholesale oil market, prices have come down. So what are we going to do about it? Well, you know what? In every recession, there are opportunities. More people make money in a recession or in a downturn than in an upturn. And that doesn't sound logical, but it is true, because there are more opportunities to pick up assets at lower prices. So, and there are more opportunities to maybe, compete against other businesses that are not even working, or just going out of business, or just giving up. So there are big opportunities in a recession. You get a big shake-up of things change, there's a disruption in the economy, and that's when you can move in if you have the right money mindset. Now, to help you with this, I've got some training which I want you to check out. It's a free training. Just have a look at that. just go on to the link below and check out my money training, Mastering Your Money. And it is a lot of it is about money mindset. Many people know what they need to do, but for some reason they just don't do it. And you know, it's like, you know what you have to do to be successful, so why don't you do it? There's lots of free stuff out there telling you how to be successful. So it is a mindset thing, and that's why I put this free training up. So do click on that link. So in the meantime, I'll be back later on in the week with another Money Tips broadcast. Thanks for listening, and I will speak to you again very soon in the future. This is Charles Kelly, bringing you Money Tips. And by the way, check out my book, Borrow and Grow Rich. Sounds a bit illogical in this day and age, but borrowing doesn't necessarily mean just going out and getting money from a bank. People over the centuries have used other people's money to make fortunes, just as Richard Branson has, Elon Musk, and the Amazon guy, Jeff Bezos. They've all used other people's money to become fabulously wealthy. In fact, Amazon was losing money for the first 5 or 6 years, and he had to keep going back to investors saying, look, I need another 50 million, I need another 20 million to keep it going. Similar thing with Elon Musk, when the first 3 space rockets he put up, you know, costing him hundreds of millions of dollars, just went up in smoke. You can imagine the feeling when you send up this rocket and it blows up in the sky, or just blows up on takeoff. And yet he kept going. He kept going back to his investors. He just said, I need more money. He had a belief in his product. So that's what Borrow and Grow Rich is really about. You can get lots of tips there. You can buy it on Amazon. You can also find it on Audible as an audio book. Okay, so enough about my book. Thanks for listening. And remember that in recessions, there are lots of opportunities if you have the right mindset. So don't be fearful. You know, just work your way through this, and things will come to an end. Just like we're going into winter now, but winter always comes to an end, and then we have spring coming. So thanks for listening, and I will speak to you again in the future. Let's just get back to here. Thanks for listening. And as I said, do check out this and check out my free training. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.